As I first began this program in September 2021, my ideas of teaching and learning have greatly changed in more ways than I had thought. Ever since I was young, I always knew that I had wanted to be a teacher. My idea of a teacher featured myself in front of a group of children, pointing to words on a board with a pointer stick. I wore glasses, with my hair up in a bun, wearing a pantsuit. If only I had known at that time that teaching was nothing like that. Teaching is understanding that your students are all different, no matter what year, age, gender, class, or personality. In order to make your classroom a space for equitable learning, it must be a space of comfort and responsiveness. When I first began this program, my knowledge on equity in the classroom was very minimal. I had a general idea of making my classroom as fair as possible for all of my students, but I wasn't sure how to name it. In my first semester of the program, I was introduced to culturally relevant and responsive pedagogy, which now I know to be an essential aspect of making my classroom a safe space for all students of every ethnicity and race. At the beginning of the semester, I was introduced to the universal design for learning and differentiated instruction. During week 3, we were asked to give our own personal plan for incorporating UDL and DI into our classrooms using our own knowledge of how it is beneficial and what challenges we might face. In this response, I stated that UDL is important because it incorporates the framework of making sure that all students receive equal treatment and equal accessibility in the classroom. This is essential, especially for those students who have any accommodation requirements that have trouble being in a classroom environment or any other difficulties. As for DI, I stated in my DLP that differentiated instruction involves how students will receive this equal treatment by using different strategies during a lesson so that all students have a fair chance to understand the material. This means using visuals, hands-on activities, kinesthetic activities, and etc. Making sure my classroom is fair for all students is an essential part of my vision of teaching and learning. The next theme that I had found in my DLP was my perspective of education on society and what kind of teacher I would like to be. In my week 1 response, I had stated that I believe education is the framework of how our society functions. What I mean by that is that education can often be seen as a requirement to become successful, which may be misconstrued as a negative perspective. This idea reminded me of the reading by John Dewey in which he states that an individual's education is shaped by their society and the environment they surround themselves in. I think that this idea fits into my own perspective because I believe that there is a reciprocal relationship between education and society, meaning that society impacts education and education impacts society. The reason why I've included this in my vision of teaching and learning is because it is important to understand as an educator. If you can see that your students are influenced by their environment and their success can support them as they grow in society, it will make your teaching journey more inspiring and put into perspective how much you can have an influence on your students. I will be a teacher that understands that each student has their own successes and goals in their lives, and that it is my responsibility to guide them in the right direction and provide them with the resources they need to succeed and grow at the best of their abilities. The final theme I will be talking about in my video today is the importance of implementing Indigenous history into my classroom. Growing up, I had no knowledge of the awful and unjust history of Indigenous peoples. While I was moving through each year of elementary school, there were events happening that should have been brought up and addressed so that we had the knowledge of what was going on in the world. Now, because of this lack of knowledge, it has inspired me to learn more about Indigenous history and to share this knowledge with my future students. In my week 4 response, I discussed the importance of implementing Indigenous history in a child-friendly way so that your students have some understanding of what has happened. Although this may be difficult, there have been many resources made available to us throughout these past 2 semesters that can be used to educate students on Indigenous history and how we can make an effort to achieve the calls to action. Here are a couple resources I have found on bringing truth and reconciliation into the classroom that can be used to bring Indigenous history and knowledge to my future students. Sometimes implementing these issues in a classroom filled with young children can be tricky, so this is a limitation I believe I might face in my future teaching experience. Many of the topics that have occurred in Indigenous history can be very difficult to talk about for some students, so I would definitely put a lot of emphasis on making sure the lesson is child-friendly and appropriate for the age group. Overall, if I were to only choose one topic to discuss for my mental image of how I will teach and learn effectively, as well as what my vision of teaching and learning will be in the future, it would be unrealistic. My vision and mental image of teaching and learning effectively is split into many different sections, my main three being making my classroom an equitable environment using UDL, DI, and CRRP, understanding the role that education has on society and the individuals vice versa, and incorporating Indigenous history into my lessons. I am very excited to have a classroom of my own one day where I can begin to watch this vision and mental image unfold, as well as to see how my students benefit from these three main aspects. I have realized now that teaching is not standing in front of a room all day pointing to a board. It is building relationships, creating safe and equitable environments, accommodating for all, and promoting success in all individuals. Thank you.